Maledictus is a horror and creepypasta narration podcast. All pieces read on the Maledictus podcast are either in the public domain, share-alike licensed, or used with explicit written consent from the author. Listener discretion is advised.
Maledictus, fear the night. Maledictus, holy might. Suffer cruel, doomed in fright. Maledictus, eternal light.
The following podcast is brought to you in part by our partnership with W Energy Drink. What is this W that everyone is talking about lately? W is a clean energy drink that is made to give you focus with no crash, jitters, or angst like those other energy drinks. Perfect for those late night ghost hunting expeditions or listening to scary stories that will terrify you in the dark. W contains vitamins, amino acids, nootropics, and 150 milligrams of caffeine for that extra energy boost. It contains absolutely zero sugar, no fillers, no artificial colors or dyes, no secret formulas, hidden ingredients, and is 100% gluten-free. Drink comes out to about $1 per drink or less. It's much cheaper than those other canned energy drinks. Even better, if you use our promotional code Maledictus at checkout, you will receive 10% off your order. And it helps to support our podcast. So order W today and be better.
This podcast may contain adult themes or adult situations. Viewer discretion is advised.
The LiveStream by Shawnn Demarco, narrated by Malfortuna. It was just another day in the life of a young influencer. A day that began like any other. I woke up, applied a thin layer of makeup, and fixed my hair before laying back down and picking up my phone. With a few strategic poses and carefully curated shots, I created the illusion of a perfect, effortless morning, a standard trick of the trade in my world. I breezed through my usual routine, recording morning affirmations, filming makeup tutorials, and indulging in a mukbang breakfast, all while snapping plenty of photos for my ever-growing social media following. My excitement grew as I noticed my follower count exploding, a result of my new phone and the valuable tips that I picked up at the recent Influencer Gala. Feeling invincible, I decided to take my content to the next level by live streaming my daily life, offering my fans an intimate, behind-the-scenes look at the glamorous existence of a rising star. One evening, after a particularly grueling workout at my local gym, I started a live stream as I walked back to my car. I chatted animately about my fitness routine, the new protein shake I was trying, and my upcoming collaboration with a famous sportswear brand. My followers were loving it, their comments and reactions pouring in, a virtual flood of adoration and encouragement. But as I approached my car in the dimly lit parking lot, a sudden, chilling presence behind me shattered the illusion of safety. Before I could even turn around, a gloved hand clamped over my mouth, stifling my screams. My phone tumbled to the ground, the live stream still running, now capturing a moment of pure, unscripted horror. I struggled fiercely against my attacker, but their grip was too strong. They dragged me roughly towards a waiting van, its sliding door open, a gaping maw ready to swallow me whole. I caught a glimpse of the frantic comments on my still broadcasting phone, followers desperately asking what was happening, pleading for someone to call the police. In a last desperate bid for freedom, I managed to break free from my attacker's grasp for just a moment. I screamed for help, my voice raw and terrified, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would come to my aid. But my attacker quickly overpowered me once more, throwing me into the van and slamming the door shut, leaving my phone and my connection to the world behind. As the van sped away into the night, I huddled in the corner, tears streaming down my face, my mind reeling with questions and fears. I had no idea who had taken me or why, but the icy tendrils of dread crept up my spine, whispering that my life had just taken a terrifying, irreversible turn. The last thing I remember before blacking out was the sound of my own choked sobs and the distant, mocking ping of comments still coming through on my abandoned phone. I woke up in a cold sweat, my body paralyzed, my wrist and ankles bound tightly to a frigid stone table. My neck burned, and I blinked and struggled to look around, my head swimming from the effects of an unknown injection. Panic rising in my chest, I strained against my bonds, the rough fibers biting into my skin, but they held fast. The reality of my situation began to sink in, a laden weight in my stomach. I was trapped, helpless, at the mercy of my captors, whose intentions I could only imagine with a mounting horror. The chanting had filled the air, suddenly stopped, replaced by the sound of footsteps approaching the table. I craned my neck, desperate to see who was coming, but my limited mobility made it impossible. A figure in a black robe and a white mask appeared, looming over my vulnerable form. "The time has come," the figure intoned, their voice distorted by the mask, echoing with a chilling finality. "The ritual can begin." More robed and masked figures emerged from the shadows, each one brandishing a long, thin blade that glinted coldly in the candlelight. They took up positions around the table. Their chanting resumed, louder and more fervent than before. I wanted to scream, to beg for mercy, but my throat was dry, and my tongue felt heavy and useless in my mouth. Tears streamed down my face as the hopelessness of my situation truly hit home. The leader of the group raised their blade high above their head, poised to strike. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself for the searing pain that was sure to come. But instead of the bite of the knife, a sudden commotion erupted from somewhere beyond the room. A voice, cold and gruff, almost familiar, called out from the darkness, "Move 2 steps to the left, you're blocking camera 3. I know you're excited and all, but other people are paying for this experience as well." I felt something warm and wet on my toes and recoiled in disgust, only to feel teeth graze my foot. One of the cultists had started to lick my toes, a new depth of depravity in an already nightmarish ordeal. As I was struggling against my bonds, I caught a glimpse of one of the cameras, its red blinking light, a silent witness to my torment. "Don't forget, we have VIPs watching from around the world," the gruff voice reminded the toe-licking cultists. "They paid top dollar for a front row seat for this ritual." The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. Not only was I about to be brutally sacrificed, but it was being live streamed to a depraved audience of wealthy sadists. The thought made bile rise in my throat, my stomach churning with revulsion. The chanting reached a fever pitch as the leader raised the blade once more. I braced myself for the inevitable, but suddenly one of the cultists stumbled, bumping into the leader. The knife slipped from their hand, clattering to the floor. In the confusion, the cultist's mask slipped, revealing a face I actually recognized. one of my most dedicated followers, someone who always left glowing comments on my post. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. As the leader bent to retrieve the knife, their robe snagged on the corner of the stone table. In their haste, they yanked at the fabric, causing the knots binding my wrists to loosen ever so slightly. Seizing the opportunity, I pulled with my might, feeling the rope bite into my skin. To my surprise, my hand slipped free and I began working on the knot around my left wrist. The cultists were too focused on the leader's mishap to notice my escape attempt. I had to be fast and quiet. Just as I freed my other hand, the leader straightened up, knife in hand. "Now, where were we?" they growled, turning back to me. I lunged forward, grabbing the nearest candle and hurling it at the leader's face. They screamed as the hot wax splattered across their mask, stumbling backwards. Using the distraction, I quickly untied my ankles and leapt off the table. The cultists were in disarray, shouting and reaching for me. I dodged their grasping hands and I ran towards the only door, praying that it wasn't locked. To my relief, the handle turned, and I burst out of the room, finding myself in a dimly lit hallway. The cultists, they gave chase behind me, their angry shouts echoing off the walls. I ran blindly, my heart pounding in my ears. I had no idea where I was or how to get out, but I knew I had to keep moving. The thought of my live stream viewers witnessing my desperate escape spurred me on. As I rounded a corner, I saw a faint light ahead, a window. I sprinted towards it, hoping and desperate, fueling steps. Behind me, the sounds of footsteps grew louder, the cultists closing in on me. I knew I only had moments before they would catch me again, and this time there would be no escape. I dove out the window, the plate glass shattering and cutting shallow galls into my well-toned thighs and calves. As I hit the ground outside, the realization that I was at the same country club where the influencer gala had taken place sent a chill down my spine. Had some of the influencers I met that night been involved in the sinister plot all along? That thought made me sick to my stomach. Ignoring the stinging pains that cut on my legs, I ran towards the dense forest bordering the golf course. The full moon cast an eerie glow over the manicured lawns and the sand traps. The shouts of the cultists behind me grew louder as they poured out the broken window in pursuit. My bare feet pounded against the soft grass as I sprinted towards the tree line. My heart was racing. I knew I had to find somewhere to hide, to catch my breath, and to come up with a plan. The forest seemed like the best place. As I reached the edge of the woods, I risked a glance back over my shoulder. The cultists were fanning out across the golf course, their dark robes making them look like a ghostly figure in the moonlight. Some of them carried flashlights, sweeping the beams back and forth as they searched for me. I plunged into the forest, the branches whipping at my face and arms as I ran. The ground was uneven, and I stumbled even more than once, but I couldn't afford to slow down. The cultists crawled through the underbrush behind me, their voices growing louder. Suddenly, I spotted a small shed nestled among the trees. It looked like a maintenance building for the groundskeepers. I veered towards it, praying that it would be unlocked. To my relief, the door swung open when I tugged on the handle. I darted inside, closing the door behind me as quickly as I could. The shed was dark and musty, filled with gardening tools and bags of fertilizer. I crouched down behind a stack of lawnmower blades, trying to calm my ragged breathing. Outside, the cultists drew closer, their flashlight beams dancing through the gaps in the shed walls. I held my breath, silently, begging them to pass by. "She can't have gone far," one of them said, their voice muffled by their mask. "Spread out and find her. The ritual must be completed tonight." I shivered, realizing they had no intention of giving up the hunt. I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. I had to find a way to get help, to let someone know what was happening. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. I thought back to the influencer gala, remembering the business cards and phone numbers that I exchanged with the other attendees. If I could just get to a phone, maybe I could call for help. But first, I had to find a way out of this forest and away from the cultists. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I knew it would take all my strength and cunning to survive this, but I was determined not to let them win. I would fight with everything I had to expose their twisted ritual and bring them to justice. I picked up a T-shaped hand tool and prepared to defend myself if cornered. A few moments later, the shed door opened, and in stepped one of the cultists, flitting his flashlight around without much focus. It was obvious that adrenaline had gotten the best of him. I was sure he had spotted me, but a few moments later, he turned around and left, declaring the shed clear. As the shed door closed behind the cultists, I let out a shaky breath, hardly daring to believe my luck. The hand tool felt heavy and reassuring in my grip, a tangible reminder that I wasn't entirely helpless. I waited a few more minutes, listening intently for any signs of that cultist returning. When I was sure they had moved on, I cautiously crept out of my hiding spot, still clutching the tool. I knew I couldn't risk going back out into the open, where I was an easy target. My best bet was to stick to the forest, using the trees as cover until I could find a way out. Just as I was starting to lose hope, I caught a glimpse of light through the trees ahead. At first, I thought it was another cultist with a flashlight, but as I drew closer, I realized it was something else entirely. There, nestled in a small clearing, was a cabin. Warm light spilled from its windows, and I could see the flicker of a television screen through the curtains. My heart leaped with the surge of hope. I approached the cabin cautiously, still gripping the hand tool tightly. I couldn't be sure who was inside, but at this point, I had to take the risk. I needed help, and this was my best chance. I climbed the steps to the porch, my legs trembling with exhaustion and fear. Taking a deep breath, I raised my fist to knock on the door. But before my knuckles could connect with the wood, I noticed a golf cart parked adjacent to the building. With my trusty tool in hand, I snuck through the shadows and made my way over to it. There, in the ignition, hung the keys, though the golf cart seemed to be plugged into cable from the wall. As quietly as I could muster, I unplugged that cable and sat my bleeding bare ass in the cold vinyl seat just in time for the door to swing open. I turned the key and slammed my foot down on the accelerator, desperate to put some distance between myself and the cultists emerging from the cabin. The golf cart lurched forward, its electric motor whirring as I sped off into the night. I had no idea where I was going, but anywhere was better than being recaptured by these maniacs. I steered the cart along the edge of the forest, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. The wind whipped through my hair, stinging the cuts on my face and legs, but I barely noticed the pain. All that mattered was escape. Behind me, I could hear angry shouts as the cultists realized I had given them the slip. I risked a glance over my shoulder and saw flashlight beams bobbing through the trees, growing fainter as I sped away. I knew I couldn't rely on the golf cart forever. Eventually, the battery would die, or I'd run out of path. I had to find a more permanent solution, a way to get help and expose those cults' twisted activities. As I drove, my mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. I thought back to the phone numbers I collected at the Influenza Gala, wondering if any of those contacts could be trusted. I also considered flagging down a passing car on the nearby road, but the risk of the cultists intercepting me was way too high. Suddenly, an idea struck me. The country club had to have security cameras both inside the buildings and around the grounds. If I could find the security office and access the footage, I'd have proof of my abduction and the cultist's sinister ritual. It was a long shot, but it was the best shot I had. I steered the golf cart towards the main clubhouse, keeping an eye out for any sign of the cultists. The building loomed ahead, its windows dark and silent. I parked the car between a row of hedges and crept towards the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached for the door handle, I hesitated. Suddenly, I was unsure if I was making the right decision. What if the cultists had already infiltrated the security office? What if I was walking into another trap? But I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I had to take action, to fight back against the monsters who had tried to sacrifice me for their twisted beliefs. With a deep breath, I gripped the hand tool tightly and opened the door, ready to face whatever lay ahead. I knew the odds were stacked against me, but I refused to go down without a fight. One way or another, I would make sure the world knew the truth about this nightmare that I endured. The sun had just begun to set as I stepped into the dimly lit clubhouse, casting long shadows across the once bustling halls. An eerie silence enveloped me, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioner and the pounding of my beating heart. I crept forward, my bare feet sinking into the plush carpet with each cautious step. My eyes darted back and forth, scanning the deserted corridors for any sign of the cultists or the security office that held the key to my salvation. After what felt like an eternity of tense exploration, I finally spotted a door marked security at the end of the long hallway. The glimmer of hope blossomed in my chest as I quickened my pace. The cool metal of the hand tool I clutched serving as a small comfort. But just as I reached for the handle, a soft click behind me shattered the silence. I spun around, raising the tool in a desperate attempt at defense, only to find myself staring at the barrel of a gun. The leader of the cult loomed before me, their white masks glinting menacingly in the low light. "Do you really think you could escape us so easily?" they asked, their voice a sinister purr that sent shivers down my spine. I stood frozen, my mind racing as I tried to calculate my next move. But before I can act, the leader gestured the gun, forcing me to back away from my only hope and rescue. "It's time to finish what we have started," they said, their tone as cold and unyielding as the stone table that awaited me. As they led me back outside, a sense of crushing defeat settled over me like a suffocating fog. I had been so close to finding help, to exposing the twisted truth behind these activities, only to have it snatched away at the very last moment. The leader marched me back to the ritual site where the other cultists waited, their faces twisted with cruel anticipation beneath their masks. They forced me back onto the blood-stained table, tightening my restraints with a renewed fervor that spoke to their hunger for violence. As the leader raised their blade once more, the metal glinting in the moonlight, I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself for the searing pain that would signal the end of my tortured existence. But suddenly, the night erupted with a wail of sirens and shouts and countless voices. My eyes snapped open to see a swarm of police officers bursting into the clearing, their weapons drawn and their faces set with a grim determination. The cultists scattered like cockroaches, exposed to the light, some attempting to fight back while others fled into the dense forest. The leader stood frozen, their knife still poised above mine as an officer tackled him to the ground with a resounding thud. In the midst of chaos, gentle hands started working at my restraints, and I looked up to see concerned face of a paramedic hovering over me. "You are safe now," they said, their voice a soothing balm to my battered soul. "We saw the live stream and tracked your location. It's over." As they helped me off the table and wrapped a blanket around my trembling shoulders, a wave of relief crawled over me, so powerful that it nearly brought me to my knees. It was finally over, and against all odds, I had survived. In the days that followed, the true extent of the cult's crimes came to light, each revelation more sickening than the last. The police discovered that at the Influencer Gala had been nothing more than a front for the cult to recruit new victims, and they had been operating years without detection, leaving a trail of broken lives in their wake. Thanks to my harrowing testimony and the damning evidence from the live stream, the cult members were arrested and faced the full weight of justice for the heinous acts. But what of the VIPs and higher-ups who orchestrated everything? There was no concrete evidence of a bigger fish, nor did I ever find out what the ritual was for or whom it was meant to appease. Those questions would likely haunt me for the rest of my days. I knew I would carry the scars that night, both physical and emotional, for the rest of my life. But I also knew I had been given a second chance, an opportunity to use my platform to raise awareness and help others who may be in danger. As I sat in front of the camera, ready to share my story with the world, I took a deep breath and smiled, feeling the strain that had carried me through my ordeal flowing through my veins. I had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to fight another day. And with the support of my followers and the knowledge that justice had been served, I knew I could face whatever challenges lay ahead, no matter how daunting they may seem. I was a survivor, a warrior, and would never let the evil that had touched my life define me. I would rise above it and would make sure that no one else would ever have to endure what I have suffered. As the red light on the camera blinked to life, I looked directly into the lens, my eyes shining with a fierce determination. "My name is Sarah," I began. My voice was steady and clear, "and this is my story." And with those words, I began to speak, pouring out my heart and soul, determined to turn my nightmare into a force for good. I knew that the road ahead of me would be long and difficult, but I also knew that I was not alone. I had the strength of my own spirit, the love of my followers, and the power of my voice. And with those weapons, I would fight on, a beacon of hope in a world that sometimes seemed all too dark.
If you'd like to make suggestions for future podcasts readings, or you'd like to submit stories of your own to be read, please contact us at stories@aedfilms.com.